Well, Rachel's accepted that we've had to make really tough decisions. Yeah. Some of the criticism that come her way, she's absorbed that and said, I had to make these tough decisions. I get that. That's absolutely fine. Some of it's not. And I don't mind that either. But when it's driven by so-called politicians who wrap themselves in the flag and then completely abandon British values, that winds me up, because I'm there to serve the country, and I mean that. You know, this is not just words. I've done it. I've been to war for the country. I've done my best to stop terrorists, and this is a continuation of that service. There's others that say it but do not display those values.
Mike, hi, morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for the coffee.
Thanks for coming in. Trying to get active politicians has been a little bit difficult. It's okay with the Reform guys that are out there talking. Trying to get in with the Conservative guys, Labour's felt harder. So after you followed me and I harassed you, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. I tell you why is I've learned I'm trying to do the interviews I want to hear.
Yeah.
I was listening to one of yours on the way down. Was it Talk TV?
Likely.
The guy was just like rat-a-tat. Every time you opened your mouth, he interrupted you.
Yeah.
And it feels like those kind of TV interviews, you're always on the defensive.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It can be. It depends.
Bring the mic in a touch.
There's like that.
Bring it in front of you so a better fit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
is that okay?
That's great.
So it depends on the broadcaster. There are some that will have you on and allow you to speak and then probe and quite rightly ask you difficult questions. That's what we're here for. There are others who have their own agenda and will just interrupt the whole way through, which is fine to an extent, but it does become a little bit pointless if you're going to go on and not have an opportunity to say what you need to say, really.
I think I want to get to know the politicians.
Yeah.
I want to get to know the people. And when they're just put on the defence, also put on the defence about every policy or everything that's said by your colleagues, I think it sometimes feels like maybe it's a bit of a trap. So I'm really, really thankful for you doing this.
That's a pleasure.
Loads to talk about. You know, I'm traditionally a Conservative.
Yeah.
As people know, I haven't voted last two elections. But I have empathy for left-wing positions as well. And so loads I want to talk to you about. But I really want to just start with, tell me what it's like becoming an MP, because you're a new MP.
I am, yes.
What's that been like?
It's been fantastic. So most days I wake up and I'm enthused, really keen to go to work, and you don't know what's going to happen that day, be it media or what's going to happen in the chamber, what's going on in your constituency. There's endless issues to deal with, particularly from the constituency. And I say to my team, there's never a moment that you'll shut your laptop and think, that's it, I'm done. Whereas in many roles, you can get to that point, you can have your weekend, you can forget about work. That doesn't happen. So you're literally working 24/7, and it's about finding the time to do that as consistently as you can. But I love it.
That balance, though, between constituency and being here in London.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine what it's like, but I do feel like sometimes, and even I'm guilty of this myself, I'll go on Twitter and I'll rant at some politicians, but I don't think we all fully appreciate the pressure and the difficulty that politicians are under.
I think, I'm not going to complain about it.
No.
We're elected to do this job. And my sort of view on how this works is we are elected to represent our constituencies in Parliament. So government in Downing Street and in the cabinet will make decisions on policy. It's my job to then ensure that folk in Dover and Deal benefit from that. So let's say, for example, £26 billion investment in the NHS. So I need to make sure that the GP services, the NHS Trust that's in East Kent, see that and benefit from that. So that, for example, people can see a GP quickly, or their treatment is received within 18 weeks. That's the target that we've set. So, whether it's NHS or policing, we need more police on the streets. So I need to make an argument in Parliament to say, there's some antisocial behaviour issues in Dover, we could do with an extra couple. But it needs to be an informed argument. So you're talking to the police, you're getting the data on crime and types, etc., and then presenting that. So that's the sort of legislative side of the job. But then there's what we call casework, and that can be quite literally anything from I'm going to lose my home in 2 days' time, whether that's a rental issue or a council housing issue, all the way to my neighbour won't cut his bush down. And it often sort of crosses with council work.
Yeah.
So what we do with those is we'll open a case essentially. And then often it's finding who's the right person to talk to about it and joining the dots to make sure that it actually gets done. But there's also very serious issues in my constituency, Dover and Deal. In Deal, we've had a childcare centre closing down under the Conservatives. They've opened a new one, but it's not fit for purpose for kids between the ages of 1 and 4. So we've got some extra funding coming down to Kent County Council, and I'm making the case that, hey, can we reopen that? Now, that's the gold standard solution on that issue. It might be that we just improve the services in the merged service. But there's a lot going on, and it never ends, to be quite honest with you.
And is some of that trying to get meetings with the right people in government at the right time to fight your case, or is some of that at PMQs fighting your case? How do you balance those two?
Yeah, there's lots of methods. So firstly, it might be you need to meet with a council officer, so the civil servants that work in the constituency, to ask, for example, why someone slipped down on a housing list, for example. It might be that they've done everything they can, so actually this is about, we actually need more council housing. So then you can arrange a meeting with the minister, housing minister. You can write them a letter. You can table a written question, which they will respond to on a parliamentary system, or you can get up in the chamber and make your case, which I really enjoy doing. Do you
remember your first one?
What's my first one? It would have been something about small boats and immigration, because that's a big issue in my area, or counter-terrorism. I imagine, but I can't actually remember what my first one was.
Is that nerve-wracking when you first go into the chamber?
Yeah. We do something called maiden speech, by the way.
Okay.
So in order to intervene on a debate, you have to have done your maiden speech first. And what that means is, in a debate, you'll sort of say to the speaker that I want to make my maiden, and you stand up and you deliver a sort of 5 to 10 minute speech, and it's all about your constituency, a bit about you, your family, but relating to the debate in some way. And I remember when I did mine, and I stood up, and it's a small chamber, but you feel so high, and your legs wobble a bit, and you feel like you're going to fall over the bench in front, and then you gather yourself and deliver. But yeah, it's pretty scary.
How do you know where you're meant to sit?
Where
you allocated a seat?
No, you can sit anywhere apart from the front bench.
Yeah.
So it's about getting there on time. So you'll see at PMQs often there's people sat on the stairs, people stood around the edges because there's no room. But you can get there at prayers. It's a very sort of weird process, and you can put a green slip in the bench to hold your place. Not many people do that, though.
Was there any part of it that you weren't prepared for? Because we can talk about your campaign to become MP for Dover, successful campaign, congratulations. But then it's like, oh shit, I've won. What does that mean? Are you fully aware what goes on in Westminster when you're running for MP, or does it all come out afterwards?
I was quite lucky. So after I left the MOD, I had a 4-year wait to for the next election. For 2 years, I was helping my lovely wife with her business, which was great fun. And then for 2 years, I actually worked for John Speller, who's one of the older MPs. He's now a Lord. So that gave me a bit of insight into the procedures and how it all works. I think the biggest challenge for new MPs is setting up a team, because you're essentially running a small business.
Yeah.
You've got a budget to employ people. You need to make sure they're doing the right jobs in the right places. And it takes time to employ, obviously, as you know. So the weekend after the election, I received thousands of emails, but I had no staff. So I worked out at one point that it would have taken me 14 days working 24 hours to spend 5 minutes on each email.
And I guess with each one,
crazy.
you've got to think, all right, what do I ignore?
Yeah.
What do I reply to?
Yeah.
What is absolute nonsense? What's important? A bit like I have these lists. Priority, super priority, shit must do today.
Yeah.
Trying to navigate that, I guess, is complex. So what size? I mean, I don't know any of this. What size team do you have?
So I've got 5 members of staff, so
Okay.
two in Parliament and 3 in the constituency. That seems to be the normal, but
Okay.
you know, I know one person has 1 in Parliament and 4 in the constituency, but that might depend on the complexity of the casework. And it's open to adjustment, and you know that's why it's constantly talking to the team and checking, you know, where are we on casework, how much more investigative work do you need, etc. But we have a really good system that monitors that I have access to, and obviously I get involved in a hell of a lot of casework day to day. So,
well, I love that you've come in from the MOD. I've got a slight issue with student politicians becoming politicians. Haven't really brought something to the table, some experience. Your experience, well, we should talk about that, but your experience means you come with something, with some expertise, some field work, you know, years out in the field. I think that's an important thing. I've been critical, not just of Labour, but also the Conservatives. I think there's a lack of, say, business experience within Parliament. I often refer to this interview that the leading guys did with John Major, where he talks about where historically Labour politicians come from or Conservative politicians come from. I think some people would maybe even be surprised coming from the MOD that you've gone to Labour, because often people who've come in from the army have historically gone into Conservatives anyway. You should probably talk about what your background in the MOD.
Sure. We've got 14 veterans in the Labour Party now.
Good.
In the PLP, Parliamentary Party, which is really important.
Yeah,
I think so. So I left school and I was a window cleaner while I was waiting to join the military. I actually applied and I was rejected initially because of an old knee injury from playing rugby. I'd snapped a cruciate ligament and they'd partially repaired the cartilage, but not the cruciate because of my age at the time. So they rejected me initially. So it took me 2 years to fight the military system around medical entry, and that, you know, I was sort of going around to consultants and getting second opinions, third opinions, and finally they let me in. So I was 20 when I finally got in. So I joined the Intelligence Corps. Now, the reason for that is because I'd read a book called The Operators when I was a kid, and it just looked fantastic. My dad was a copper. He'd done a bit of intelligence work in the past as well, so I had a bit of an understanding there. Went in, basic training, of course, trade training, took about 6 months at Chicksands near to Bedford.
Yeah,
lovely place.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time in the pubs in Bedford, which was good fun.
Yeah, I probably know them.
Yeah, God, I mean...
I own one of them now.
Do you? Which one?
I own a bar called the Auction Room.
Right, okay.
Which is the late night bar, once the pubs close, that people come and have a few drinks. Although, we could talk about that under a lot of economic pressure at the moment.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. We'll come to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't remember the pubs that I was in, which is probably for a reason.
Rose is the common one.
Right.
Yeah, they say, it's so funny. I used to, when I was about 18, 19, I used to drink in this bar called the Rose, and you say Rose till closed. You go in there, stay until it's closed. Anyway, my son's 20 now, and I remember the first time he came home and he's like, yeah, Dad, going to the Rose tonight. I was like, okay, cool, what time are you back? He's like, Dad, Rose till closed. I was like, no.
It makes you feel older that way.
Hey, I feel so old these days. I'm taking the kids to see Central C tonight, and I'll be honest, I think they want me to stay at the back.
I don't even know who that is.
He's a drill rapper.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty cool.
That sounds fun.
Anyway, sorry, interrupt.
So basic training, trade training, intelligence operator stuff.
Yeah.
And then went into a sort of specialist unit, which I was the analyst for. Did a tour of Iraq, which was pretty tough. We weren't leaving the COB, the contingency operating base at the time. I wouldn't have left anyway because I was an analyst, but no one was going out because we'd had that legal transfer of powers to the Iraqi, but we were just getting smashed by Iranian Chinese rockets on a daily basis, 20, 30 rounds at a time.
Into the base?
Into the base.
What, just randomly landing?
Yeah. So it psychologically...
Killing people?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Fuck.
And it was quite tough simply because you're not using any military training at all. You're just laying down and hoping it doesn't hit you. And I'll always remember the first attack, actually, because in my sort of childhood enthusiasm, I suppose, before deployment, I was quite excited about the prospect of just being at the tough end of it. Really, that's what you sign up to do, isn't it? To serve in that way. And I remember the first attack, and I was pretty devastated, thinking, bloody hell, there's nothing I can actually do to protect myself here.
Was Iraq really just a hellhole?
From what I saw, yeah. I mean, I never left the base, but it was tough. But saying that, there was a Pizza Hut and a Subway, so I'm not going to pretend I was in the trenches. But
still, though, that like the daily thought of, you've got family who worry about you the whole time. Yeah. That daily experience of bombs coming over. I mean, that's why. I mean, I'm just horrified by war because the people who start wars are sending people to potential death, and
absolutely,
I think we go to war a little bit too easy.
Yeah, and this is, if we talk more about foreign policy later, avoiding wars at the very heart of it, because I have seen it. So I did Iraq, and then after that went for selection into the actual unit, so not working as an analyst. Passed the selection. I was the most junior ever soldier at the time to pass selection, which I was really proud of. That's probably changed now. And then deployed to Afghanistan twice, which
How did that compare?
That for me was better.
Okay.
Strangely, I was out on the ground. I wasn't a frontline soldier. I wasn't fighting, but I felt like I was more in control of what was going on.
But you still had IEDs in Afghanistan.
IEDs, but I operated within town centres in general, in and around town centres. So I wasn't, in general, heading out to the villages and on those, tricky roadways where they're laying the IEDs. A part of my role was to find out where the IEDs are being laid, to ensure that we remove them to protect the troops, essentially. But I found I really enjoyed those two tours. We felt like we made a difference, and I felt in control of the risk to an extent, I suppose. But it was tough at times.
Yeah.
So I was one of those weird ones where I'd get back from deployment and get bored very quickly. So I would volunteer for the next deployment, because it wasn't like brigade where you'd have I think 18 months is the rule between deployments. It might be longer, actually, but for my small unit, if you put yourself forward, they take you on, essentially, which is why I did 3 deployments in just 5 years. It's a really short period of time. Then I got back the third time. I don't want to go again.
Yeah.
So a soldier who doesn't want to deploy is probably not the most effective soldier. So at that point, I left.
And what did you do from there? So
then I went to a national crime agency. That was quite a short period, actually. That's for 2 years. Again, working in the intelligence world against drug lords, paedophiles, smuggling gangs, all sorts of crime, cybercrime as well. So it's quite a wide range, which frustrated me at times because I like to specialise if I can.
Yeah.
One of my operations sort of crossed over into the counter-terror world almost by accident, and then I ended up going to the MOD for 5 years doing solely counter-terrorism.
So when you were at the National Crime Agency, did you get to then see the vast amount of work they're dealing with, the pressures they're under that maybe we don't understand that government departments have to deal with?
Yeah. And I went there just after they changed from SOCA, Serious Organised Crime Agency, to National Crime Agency, which meant they changed from an intelligence role, essentially, to intelligence and enforcement, which means, you're collecting intelligence, you're creating an evidential pack to put to the CPS, the criminal prosecution, and then going in and arresting them. So it was a from beginning to end process, whereas SOCA was just the intelligence, and then they'd fire that over to the police or security services, wherever it might be, to deal with it. So it was still finding its feet while I was there, to be honest. And I expect it's developed a lot since I left.
Yeah, and then within counter-terrorism, the MOD, again, how much I'm not even sure how much you can talk about the work you did there, but what is the scale of the problem that they're dealing with? Because we hear about, thousands of people being monitored, who may be at risk or they're concerned about? What's the scale of the issue?
Yeah, so I worked in the intelligence collection side of things, but of course I spoke with those who were assessing the threat posed, and it's really tough because the Islamist terror threat is still there, and it was probably higher when I was working in that world. And the amount of referrals that have come through of potential threats that they've got to then assess and work out, where do we put our assets? Because obviously, it's not endless in terms of where you can operate. And that's not easy to do.
Well, because you hear about incidents, somebody will go out and stab some people.
Yeah.
There'll be, and they'll say, well, this person was monitored or was on a list. And so there's a big uproar.
Yeah.
Why weren't they stopped? But if you try and step back rationally and not just have a go at government for the sake of it, I try to think about this and think, well, if you're monitoring thousands of people, you need thousands of people to monitor them. How do you monitor them? Are you just monitoring communications? Are you following them? Can you follow everybody all the time? Probably not. How do you know when somebody's even super high risk? They themselves are probably being trained into not being identifiable, hopefully for them, not for us, hopefully for them. And so it feels like a problem that it's easy to criticize from the outside, but on the inside, it's really hard work.
Yeah, it is tough. And we've seen with the Southport incident that there's this new almost style of terrorist. We've seen Lone Wolf before, by the way.
Yeah.
That Islamist terrorist who's self-radicalized in their bedroom, pick up a knife, go out and do something. That's hard enough. There's this new type, which is that confused, conflicted ideology, not even an ideology as such.
Just angry.
Access to vile murders and crimes that are happening online, and they're seeing that, and for some reason, some warped reason, they like that and want to do that. Maybe there's a notoriety type aim for them to become famous. I don't really know, but they're difficult to monitor. To even have them on the radar is difficult. And we saw the Southport incident that there had been referrals. So that's why it's so important that we have this full review to see what went wrong and what we can do better. It might be that it could have been mental health services could have been better. That this person should have been referred and dealt with like that. I don't know. But we'll see. And I expect, we will take it very seriously, because obviously protection of the public is number one priority.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines the world's most responsible currency the right way. Because the future depends on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, what happened there was horrific, absolutely horrific. But I'm never going to pretend I know how hard these problems are to deal with, how many referrals, what the budget's constraints are dealing with these issues. I'm not going to sit here and just shout at the government when I don't know the information. But I think the review is important.
Yes.
There's not going to be because you were whipped not to vote for a full inquiry, right?
So this is on the child grooming.
That was a separate.
Incidents.
This wasn't. So are we having a full?
Right. So this actually infuriates me, the angle that some politicians are coming at this from. And I've talked about British values a lot, and I think that it really falls deeply below British values. Essentially, what we had there was a call for a new national inquiry. Our argument was that we've had that. which ended in 2022.
Is that the J report?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are arguments, by the way, that perhaps wasn't comprehensive enough solely on the grooming gang side of things.
It focused on 6
So
towns?
so 6 towns, there are more.
50, up to 50?
Potentially.
Yeah.
And this is where those local inquiries are also really important. And Oldham have launched one now, and we fully support that. The issue with the votes, now I'll tell you from a backbench point of view what I had in front of me. So we had a bill, and within that bill were lots of great stuff for kids, pre-breakfast clubs, etc. But also there were measures in there to protect children from potential abuse. So things like kids that are not in school, having them on a register to ensure that we can monitor and ensure that they're being looked after properly. Now, if we had voted through the amendment that was put in, then because of the stage the bill was at, it would have fallen down and collapsed.
Right.
Now, 2 of the measures that were in there were from the J report. So what we had, and I had this from certain politicians, where they actually accused me of allowing child groomers to walk free. Now, I've arrested paedophiles in the past, right? This has always been something I care about. It's always been something Keir Starmer cares about. He reopened investigations when he was at the Director of Prosecutions, something that Jess Phillips has always cared about. You know, her whole life has been dedicated to protecting women and girls from violence. So to take that line, I think falls well below British values, because they know full well what we were voting for that day. And I'm not saying there's not a sensible debate to be had around national inquiry, etc. And that's perhaps for another time. But that vote was not about that.
I think some people might not even fully understand what the whip is. I mean, I've only recently come to understand what the whip is and how it works.
Yeah.
But you have votes where you have to follow the whip, and then you have free votes. I think the assisted dying bill was a free vote.
Yes.
But certain votes you have to vote with the whip, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to explain that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the assisted dying bill, by the way, was really tough for me. But we'll talk about that later. Possibly.
Well, that's I mean, look, it's really easy. It's tough for everyone.
Yeah.
You're either voting for a system of allowing people to choose to end their life, and there's warrior coercion, or you're voting for people to be left in horrific, potentially pain, difficult circumstances. Anyone who says this is an easy vote, I mean, maybe if you're religious and your religion says so, I understand, but it's not an easy decision. I mean, I listened to the debate. It was heartbreaking.
Really tough. And I met so many people, but I will talk about the whip in a minute. Met so many people beforehand from both sides, and they came at it, both of them, from a place of compassion, and they're all good people. So it was really tough. And in the end, I had to weigh up the worst case scenario of each. So the worst case scenario of it going through with tight mitigations around coercion. There might be at some point someone who is accidentally coerced, which would be absolutely tragic, right? That's the worst case there. And even saying it now is difficult. The worst case of the status quo is people will continue to suffer on a daily basis. Fact. So I had to weigh them up, and I came to that conclusion. But I still found it really tough, and I still do now. But I felt like that was the right place to go. Yeah. Really tough. But good debate on it as well.
Yeah, and in some ways, parking the difficulty of the debate, it was probably one of the best moments of British democracy because there wasn't a whip. It didn't matter what the party line was. People stood up and they said what they honestly felt. It was an emotional debate to listen to, and it was one I was actually quite proud of Parliament at that point, because it was a empathetic, compassionate debate where you listen to all sides of the argument. Obviously, afterwards, everyone voted. It's like, oh, you voted for murder, or you voted for, and people start slinging their mud. But we're actually in this room listening to the debate. It was. I was really. I kind of. It was debate. You talk about the value, British values. It kind of felt like how you wanted more debate. Yeah. Look, I enjoy a bit of the banter in Westminster, but sometimes you want a serious debate, and you want to feel like people are saying what they think and feel, not what the party says they should think and feel.
So I agree on British values, and that's what I want to see more of in Parliament, and that's why it wound me up seeing the games played on the grooming gangs and the Southport incident. I think these are things we come together on. We're sensible and we come to a solution together to do the best for the country. I think that's really important. On the whip, so we're part of I'm a member and an MP for a political party, and that political party, Labour Party, is looking to pass through legislation in government that we were voted to pass from the manifesto that was voted through. So we're not a club, we're not a debating society, although we do debate. We're a serious government, and therefore to deliver what we were voted to deliver, we have to vote in a certain way to get that legislation through. For me, it's as simple as that. And I don't struggle with it because I have a lot of faith in this government. My politics are in a very similar place to where the government is. So I don't disagree with what we're doing. There's parts that perhaps could be tweaked, but in general, I get it. I agree with it. I see where we're going, where we're taking the country. And that's why the whip works. Without the whip, you'd have chaos, essentially.
Yeah.
Not necessarily with the Labour Party. I'm just talking in general.
And I'm assuming on the telephone and WhatsApp and backroom meetings, that's where the debate happens within the party. If the party is decided on a policy, and some might be easy, some might be contentious. That's where the debate happens before it comes to Parliament to vote. That's a chance to voice your opinion
within the party. So we have PLP meetings every Monday at 6:00 where MPs all go, and that's our opportunity to have a chat. And we'll have
AM or PM.
PM. So you'll have, for example, on Monday it was Darren Jones and Rachel Reeves in there. I couldn't make that one, unfortunately, but you'll always have a minister there to talk about the sort of hot topic of the day. But of course, MPs will talk behind the scenes as well. But the main debate where we take things is in the chamber.
Right.
It's very structured as well.
So why was Labour an obvious decision for you? Have you always been a Labour voter?
Yes. So I've been a member for over a decade. I was not politically active at all until 2020 when I left the Ministry of Defence. But it's within me, the values, that sort of fairness, equality, standing up for working people, but also firmness. And my perception of British values is reflected best by the Labour Party, which is why I'm a Labour Party member of Parliament. I've had George Galloway in that seat. I've had William Clouston in that seat, SDP. Mm-hmm.
I know plenty of Labour voters. The left is a spectrum of Corbyn ideas through to more kind of centre left. There is a broad range. A lot of people I've spoken to said the Labour Party now has forgotten its roots of the working class. Would you think that's a fair accusation?
No. There's a broad spectrum across all parties, we've got to remember. The Conservatives at the moment are ripping themselves to pieces because they don't know whether to go David Cameron or style or Robert Jenrick, Nigel Farage. Where do they go?
It's
They're
a real
ripping
challenge
themselves
for
to
them.
pieces. We had Jeremy Corbyn. He was a disaster. I would never have stood under Jeremy Corbyn. Simple as that. He does not reflect my values or the values of the country. He's not a Labour Party politician anymore, and I'm really glad about that. To not stamp on anti-Semitism, for me, is vile. So now we've moved on. We are a party that's more, centre-left. That's where Keir Starmer sits, in my view. I can't talk for him. But, looking at what we're trying to do with the country, a part of that is serving working people, and we mean it. And if you look at what we're doing so far, so we've inherited a real mess.
Every government says that.
I know they do.
Every government says
that. But we have, and we're feeling it, right?
Yeah.
Heating your home, wage packets, life's become much tougher.
Oh, I don't disagree, by the way. I think the Conservatives' last 14 years have been a disaster.
I mean, they destroyed the economy. And Liz Truss, who I know you've had on.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of Liz Truss.
She's defended herself. But what she did to my mortgage and to my voters' mortgages and to the rental sector as a result of that has been awful. And it's left people suffering. So,
but you know her arguments.
Of course. And look, she makes her arguments and she wants to remain relevant. She had her chance. And look what happened to the economy.
I'm not sure she really had her chance. I agree. So I agreed with her policies. I agree with tax cuts. I always agree with tax cuts. I think the smaller the government, the better. The less tax everyone pays, the better. As somebody who spends money in the economy and runs businesses, I know every time there's a tax increase, it reduces what I spend and it reduces my opportunities to create more businesses. So I know all of that. Tax cuts, I agree with. Increased borrowing to stimulate the economy, I agree less with, but I understand why it happens. But her argument was that because of the way the interest rates were, and she talks about LDIs, which I'm not going to try and explain, but she said that it was not possible to deliver her mandate. And she said she blamed the civil service for this. She said the civil service has got too big. The Bank of England has its own mandate and what it wants to do, and the OBR has its own mandate and what it wants to do, and they don't support the mandate of the government. And her view is it should be a bit more like the US system. We're seeing the appointment now of Trump staff where people have to sit in front of the Senate and be grilled. We saw RFK yesterday.
That was interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. A bit weird at times. But that's her argument. Yes, it was a disaster what happened, the outcome. But I felt they were the right decision for the country. That's my personal view.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. I'm not an economist, but I can only look at fact here, and we all suffered. Moving forward, what Rachel Reeves is looking to do is set the scene and lay the foundations for growth. And what we've seen it's only 6 months, by the way.
I know.
And you appreciate these things take time, right? But we did inherit that black hole, and I know people hate us saying it, but it's fact. So we have to keep reminding people what we've inherited, because that's why it's tough. But you've got to look now. We've got the highest investment into the country for 19 years. Wages are growing at its highest rate for 3 years. We've seen to be the second most attractive country to invest in. So these things are laying the foundations for growth. Opening up the country for house building, for infrastructure building is really important, because that creates jobs. And if you create jobs, you create growth. It will take time to see those results, but I'm really confident in Rachel Reeves that we will get to that point.
They certainly feel like talking points. And I'm not going to live fact check you. I just talk about real lived experiences. We have, when you operate a business, you have direct taxes and indirect taxes. The taxes on us exist at the moment is, the general taxes of running a business, whether that's a local business rates, or that's corporation tax, or national insurance going up. We know there's an impact on that. But we have these kind of indirect taxes. The changes to the employment laws are an indirect tax, because ultimately, as a business, it will cost us more. The energy prices are an indirect tax. I'm not blaming Labour for that. That's certainly something that Conservative failed to solve. But there are so many of these indirect taxes on a business now. It's really hard to create. Certainly small businesses, which we want the middle class to create, they're really hard to do. And I've seen the big statements from Rachel Reeves. I don't think she's attacked the things that small business and the middle class need. I think that's the bit that's been left behind.
So I run a business as well with my wife. It's a small dog care business, but it's small business. I've stepped back the day after the election. I removed myself from the directorship. So focus on one thing only. But of course, I speak to my wife about the business regularly. It's a small business. She's got 4 members of staff. She's running 4 or 5 vehicles. She's running a site. She's got hundreds of clients, and things like the employment allowance raising from 5,000 to 10,000 on national insurance meant that her business, for example, actually leveled out. And a lot of my constituents have come to me and say, look, I run a small business and I'm worried at the moment. And I've said to them, go and talk to your accountant. It's not that simple to, you've got to do the maths, and then let's talk more. 90% of them don't come back to me because they haven't been impacted in the way that the media have told them they're going to be impacted. And we've also got to look at the fact that, if we're going to create wealth, then it's going to have to be those with the broader shoulders that that carry that burden.
What do you mean by that?
So in terms of taxes, that's where it's going to fall, and that's what we've seen from the last budget. But we talked earlier about us being the party of working people. We've raised the minimum wage. That's really significant. We've given them more rights in work, and you've talked about that being difficult.
Well, it also costs jobs. So when you raise the minimum wage, it costs jobs because some people recruit less, or.
But we're seeing 70% of businesses in this country expect to increase their profits over the next few years. Right, that's gone up from 62%. That's what the data say, and this is all ONS, IFS type figures that I've seen. So not being an economist myself, I see that, and I think over the next few years we're going to see growth, I hope, and we're going to see increased job opportunities and businesses thriving, but there has been tough decisions to make, and I don't deny that, and that's because of what we've inherited. But if we'd continued down the route the Conservatives set us on, we'd now be talking about potential recessions. We wouldn't be having outside.
Well, we're still talking about potential recessions,
but we're moving away from there. We wouldn't we'd be talking about the fact that no one wants to invest in the country, but now we're the second most attractive investment opportunity for the world. So we're going in the right direction, but it hasn't been easy.
Yeah, no, I get it. How difficult is it to have a broad understanding or detailed understanding of everything? Because even doing the show, I find it difficult. There's so many subjects I can quiz you on. I mean, you see, I've got no notes really. I don't know where it's going to go. When you talk about list, I can't really explain LDIs. I'm just a moron who just talks to people about bollocks, really. But
I think you're very informed, actually, from what I've seen.
I've got, but I have to have a bit of knowledge. But still, there's endless gaps in my knowledge. We could, when we get into immigration, I don't know the stats. I know maybe there's millions come over, but what I mean is what I'm trying to get to is there's so much that you need to know, like a little bit about, and perhaps detailed. And how do you even cope with that?
It's tough. So you have to know a little about a lot.
Yeah.
I know a lot about counter-terrorism, policing, foreign policy, military. That's my thing. I serve my constituents with their day-to-day matters. But it's the media. So when we do media, we need to be able to talk about things with authority. So it's essentially ensuring that you're clued up and you spend a lot of time reading. But it's not easy. You're right.
And I think it's okay to say, I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. Which is, again, why I prefer these type of conversations, because you get to know a person, you get to be honest, you get to like I say, I saw that Rat-a-tat interview where it was like question, you'd half finish an answer, he'd come back at you. To me, it's no use. It almost feels like he was trying to find the bit where you'd slip up and go,
absolutely,
I got you. And that to me takes me to that kind of the general state of politics at the moment. There's two ways I look at it. You can easily get sucked in, which I have done, which is to like yell and be angry and throw stuff at people. But then there's this flip side where I go, we've got to take a step back and think about what we're asking of politicians. Are we being fair with the truth? And what is the role the media is playing in all of this? And for me at the moment, I think we're in a good place in some areas. I think rise of independent media has been good. Obviously, I'll say that. But I also think we are, possibly going back to your point, we are slipping away from British values of being fair with each other, having a good, honest debate. It's mudslinging a lot of the time. I
completely agree.
Yeah.
That sort of fairness, firmness. Firmness is really important because I think that's what we stand for. But justice, polite discussion, stiff upper lip. That's what we stand for, and we don't want to go down that route that some social media platforms take us in, I think.
You're talking about X. You're talking about Elon Musk.
I mean, look, the number of anonymous accounts and bots, but particularly anonymous accounts as well, people hide behind in order to say things they'd never say in the street, worries me slightly. Whereas everything I say on any social media platform, I'd say in the street and I'd say it on telly, and I think that it brings down the level of debate often because there's that option to say anything and get away with it, essentially.
I think there's a counter argument to that, is that in a more anarchist world, the pressure it puts on people, the pressure it puts on someone like yourself will force you to kind of sharpen your sword as such for your arguments. I see both sides. I just I'm certainly not keen on restricting speech. Look, Twitter is a shit show. X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is a shit show.
Should never restrict freedom of speech.
No, but I also quite like it. I quite like the fact that, I mean, Elon Musk being a free speech absolute is obvious bollocks. He has censored accounts. People have to be realistic about that. But at the same time, people can pretty much go out and say what the hell they want. And we've been through periods of social media censorship, and I think that's a worse situation.
I think if you wouldn't say it in the street, then why would you say it online?
Well,
that's my view.
Yeah,
There's still freedom of speech, right? I'm saying you can say it in the street.
I mean, look, when you operate a platform like this, you get YouTube comments and tweets and people saying all kinds of shit. They never say it in person. I think in 8 years of doing this, I've had one person act like they went on Twitter in person. And then they apologise. They actually came back and said, "Oh, sorry, I feel like
they're lovely when you meet them, right?"
Well, no, they were a dick. And then I was in a bar, like a pre-event, and they were such a dick to me. I even said, look, we're not on Twitter now. Anyway, they went away and apologised and bought me a beer. Yeah, look, it's a weird world. Must be a much weirder world for you to navigate. It's funny, I go and look at any post, doesn't matter whether it's Labour or Conservative, but it's Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner, whether it's the Labour Party account itself, whether it's Farage, all you see is a barrage of hate in the reply. Do you read the replies? Yeah. It's just a barrage.
Sometimes,
of
not very regularly.
Fuck you. Everyone's a lot of people angry though.
Yeah.
And I think that's been reflected in I think it's been a tough first 6 months for Labour. And I'm not a Labour voter, I never would. But even I at times think, yeah, this has been rough.
It has been tough. Some of it is fair. And I think,
what's been fair?
Well, Rachel's accepted that we've had to make really tough decisions. Yeah. And so, some of the criticism that come her way, she's absorbed that and said, I had to make these tough decisions. So, I get that. That's absolutely fine. Some of it's not. And I don't mind that either. But when it's driven by so-called politicians who wrap themselves in the flag and then completely abandon British values, that winds me up. Because I'm there to serve the country, and I mean that. This is not just words. I've done it. I've been to war for the country. I've done my best to stop terrorists, and this is a continuation of that service. There's others that say it but do not display those values.
Is that because you're new? You're fresh in here, and you've got these great intentions, and give 5-10 years, you can be like, fuck this.
This will always remain my approach. It's about service. It's as simple as that. It's about delivering for the country, and for my constituents first and foremost, of course.
How difficult is it within Parliament? No, let me put it a different way. Thinking about your career as a politician, you seem great to me.
Thank you, Peter.
I really like it. I'm not sure in your football team, but you've got a career now. You've been in you've been in the military service. You've been in the MOD. You're now in Parliament. Obviously, if you have career aspirations, I assume at some point you'd like to make that front bench. Maybe you'd like even to be Prime Minister one day. How does that work in terms of, because how many MPs have Labour got?
400, over 400, so 411. So
front bench is what, 14 on?
I mean, so within the as in minister jobs, it must be around 50ish. I'm not 100% sure how many. So you'll have the Home Sec, and then you'll have the junior ministers under her, and I think there's 5, for example, in each department. Right.
So how does that work as a career for you? Is it about getting to see as many people as possible, building relationships with the most senior people? Is there a game to be played in part, if you're honest?
I think that there's a number of things. So firstly, I would love the opportunity at some point in my career, if I'm asked to represent the country, because that's what you're doing at government level. At the moment, it's Dover and Deal. I love that. It'll always come first. If there's an opportunity to represent the country and make decisions that make the country better, then that would be an absolute honour. At the moment, the way it works for me, I'm only 6 months in, right? Let's not get ahead of myself. It's about delivering for Dover and Deal, but also speaking up and getting the message that I think is right for the country, which is why I talk so much about British values and what we stand for, because it means so much to me. It genuinely does. But also, things like immigration, secure borders, national security, policing. I think people care about those things. And so I'll talk about it lots, and maybe one day I'll get to make decisions around those things.
Any particular department you'd like?
Oh, come on. Look, my natural interest lays in sort of home affairs because of my counter-terror work, policing work, interest in immigration. But I wouldn't want to make a pitch. I think that would be silly.
I mean, the British values, I feel like we've got this resurgence of British values. When I was a kid, British values was the pride of England, let's say, less so Britain, was wrapped in football.
Yes, yeah.
And wrapped in hooliganism. And often when you saw an English flag, there was almost like a little bit of shame that came with it, because it was...
So you're talking like, at the Euros where there's thugs throwing beer at each other and that sort of thing.
That's when there was a period of, certainly when I was younger, that's what it felt like. But I feel like there's been this resurgence of British values now. People talking about, actually, no, let's be proud to be British. It's not just football people who are proud.
No.
There's England-Britain complication there, and there's been that resurgence. I've heard it from everyone, from yourself. I've heard it from people I spoke to in Reform, people I spoke to in Conservatives. And I think that's a good thing. I think we've been made to feel a little bit ashamed of parts of our history, and we've kind of hidden away from that, pride around our nationality and our flag. Yeah, certainly
absolutely.
Our flag.
I think we should stand proud as a small island and what we've achieved, and we've led the way. Think about the Industrial Revolution. The world would not be where it is now without this great country. So I grew up in my family. So my dad was a copper. My mum was a social worker. My nan and granddad on one side worked for Royal Mail and a union man on the other side, a Coleman's mustard salesman. And they were all really proud Brits, particularly my granddad, the Coleman's mustard salesman. And I didn't notice at the time, but it was almost sort of drummed into me that we're proud of this country. And seeing my dad's service and his commitment was almost ridiculous. He worked harder than I've seen anybody work. Even when he was off duty, he was on duty. The sort of copper that criminals hate, and he was very good. And my mum, going out every day and helping old people. So she was a care home worker, actually not a social worker. Going out and helping old people who themselves, many are war veterans, and trying to make their lives more comfortable. It's a tough gig, There's not much money in either of those jobs, but it was about service, and that was really instilled in me, I think.
It's very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with CASA.
There's definitely a lot of pressure on councils at the moment. We've seen in the last week that, I can't remember, is it Section 114 notice, whereby councils, if they want to raise the council tax more than 4.99% without a referendum, they can only do it if they're going bankrupt. So I think we're all perfectly aware councils are under a lot of pressure. I had considered running for mayor locally in Bedford. I wasn't happy how things were going. And when I looked into the job, I felt it was a job it's almost impossible to do. The percentage of the budget that goes to social care is phenomenal. And I'm pretty sure it's a legal requirement to spend that money. And so I know our council is under constant pressure because of social care, because of services to protect children, vulnerable people. There never seems to be enough money. And that means we're starting to see things like, as I said, council tax, I think one place 25%. I can't remember where. Birmingham, I think, is 9.99%. Lots of massive rises. We're also seeing the look to cut services, black bin collections in some places. They're looking to move to 4 weeks. How big a challenge is it locally? How big is it?
It's a big challenge. And people see that front end, don't they? The bins, the potholes, the immediate things you notice. But you're right, behind the scenes, there's a lot of money being spent on things like social care and, special educational needs as well. but not enough money has come down from central government for over a decade. And I remember in Kent, the council leaders were writing, they were Conservatives, writing to the Conservatives to say, we need more money. But when you don't have growth, and this comes back to growth, it's difficult to fund your councils where they need to be funded. So it's really important that we do see that growth so money can go down. We are seeing some increases. So, for example, in Kent, there's 27 million have gone for bus services. Now, that's actually been really important for me in Dover, where they were looking to cut one of the buses. I don't want to go too much into that. I don't bore people talking about buses. But for my constituents, it's so important because people were about to be cut off from one area. There's elderly people couldn't get into town. And that's now being reinstated with number 67, you'll be pleased to know. But, that money is really important, but it does come down to having a better fiscal picture centrally, and then the whole country benefits from it.
I think, I'll speak for myself. I'm always like, where's the money going? Because taxes they've just factually gone up almost for everyone during my adult life. Continue. I can't remember the percentage GDP, but it's gone for something like 30% to 40%. So the government's taking more money. Yet we're seeing a decline in services. We know the NHS waiting lists are up. Yes, there's a COVID argument for that period, but this kind of drop in services locally. I own a football team, as you know, so I need services from the council. Planning is a nightmare. Trying to get support is an absolute nightmare. Sometimes you wonder, where's all the money gone, or where's it going? Because if they're taking more from us from tax, and services are declining, is there a huge amount of waste? We sometimes just wonder where it all goes.
I've not worked in a council, but I would imagine that. But
even central government,
I'd imagine that a lot of it is interest on debt, but also efficiency. And this is why reform is so important as well. Not the political party. Reform is. Reforming the services. So
you're saying that slightly. You're not saying reform. You're saying reform.
Reform. Am I saying that wrong?
Well, no. I thought you might be doing it because you don't want to sound like you're as a vote for Farage.
Sometimes I have a weird way of saying things. So let's take the NHS for example. So we've got £26 billion worth of new funding coming in. That's really important because look at the picture we've inherited. To have that money going in there is not easy. But Wes Streeting's made it really clear that they'll reform the services within as well. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but efficiency is so important. Is there too much senior management, for example? I don't know the answer, but Wes will.
But my only thing on that is I feel like the history of my adult life, every new government's come in, or every government trying to retain their position said there's going to be another 20 billion for the NHS. I've continually heard this. Yet services have declined.
Yes.
The waiting lists have increased.
Yes.
The time people are spending in A&E, the number of ambulances people left on. So for some reason, we always put more money into the NHS and it's not making a difference. And I don't know the answer, but I just feel like it's these increases of funding start to feel like they feel quite hollow.
Wes has he had something called a Darcy review conducted. That's finished, and that's a part of what it was looking at, how he saves money as well as where to spend it. To be honest, throwing figures at people doesn't tend to work, does it? We need to see the results, and the aim is to have from seeing a doctor to your treatment down to 18 weeks, which you haven't seen in over a decade. And we need to be able to see GPs within 48 hours. Now, these are really important. That's what people will feel, isn't it? And when we last left government, we achieved that. And I always remember Tony Blair on there, I think it's question time. And one of the questions was, I want to see my GP in a week, but I have to see him in 48 hours. I would love to have that problem again. And that's what we're aiming for. We've done it before. I'm confident we'll do it again.
What do you think about the idea of leveraging the private sector a bit more? You as a Labour guy.
Yeah.
So I started using the private doctors in Bedford. It's £50 for an appointment. They usually see you in the same day.
Yeah.
If not, it's the next day. So kind of what you want from the NHS, but you can't get it. And I started using it because I remember calling up for an appointment. It was 3 weeks. I was like, I can't wait 3 weeks. So I started using it. It's a great service because it's profit incentivized. It operates on different mechanics than, say, the NHS. From that, I took private health for me and my kids. I think you could have a mechanism to incentivize people to use the private system more if there was some kind of, tax allowance, tax rebate for doing that. As a Labour voter, what do you think of things like that? And I will throw into that private education.
Yeah.
And the reality of I don't know if you supported that on education. The reason I disagree with that on education is it hit people at the margin of private education. There are a number of people I know who've now taken their kids out of private school because they can't afford it. The bursary system now has more pressure on it, and when it takes people away, it fills from the top, from the rich people whose kids are maybe not smart enough to get into private school. They're now getting in, so it feels like that tax has been a net negative for the education of people in this country. So I sometimes feel like we should celebrate success, celebrate rather than have this tall poppy syndrome, and incentivize people to maybe start using the private sector a bit more.
So starting with the NHS, Wes has been really clear that we won't let ideology get in the way of saving lives.
Okay.
So in terms of using the private sector, but paid for by the state in order to speed up life-saving treatment, that's what Wes has said he will do. And I think that's really important. What we shouldn't do, in my view, is what Farage wants to do, and that's an insurance-based system, because we're about working people, and we have to ensure that everyone has a good standard of treatment free at the point of use. That, for me, is ingrained in Britain. We're proud of the NHS. It suffered under the Conservatives. We'll rebuild it and ensure that everyone has that healthcare to keep them alive. That's what we're talking here. So I think that's really important, but we mustn't let ideology get in the way of saving lives. I'm really happy that Wes is going down that route, to be quite honest with you. And that's uncomfortable, by the way, for Labour politicians, but it's about service. On the schools, I get what you're saying, by the way. This is how we've come to this conclusion. So 94% of kids are in state schools, right? State schools are suffering with funding. There's an estimated, excuse me if I get the stats slightly wrong, but I think it's 1.7 billion will be raised through this VAT. And you're right in saying that some kids might then move into the state school, but the IFS have said that that's 0.5%. There's 9 million kids in state school education. They're looking at around 40,000 moving, I think, which will not impact. That was calculated.
Impacts them, though.
Well, actually, because the extra money coming down, 1.7 billion, the assessment is that it won't. But what's really important there for me is kids who are sent to these schools because of special needs, that they're not being served sufficiently in state schools. Fortunately, they are exempt from this VAT, so they can still do that. But at the same time, we can bring state schools up so that they don't need to do that for SEND, because we've got a real problem with that at the moment.
I feel like there's certain things we shouldn't tax. Or add VAT. We don't add VAT to healthy food, kids' clothes, education, which is kids as well. I feel like adding taxation to that is penalising children. And I feel like that's one of the areas, I think that was a misstep. I think that is ideological. And I felt like that was, I know people who've friends of mine have had to pull their kids out of an education that they wanted to give them. These aren't rich people. These are people who are sacrificing maybe a holiday, or both parents are going to work. They're on the fringe of, I went to private school. My dad was an engineer and my mum's a nurse. There's no fucking way they could afford private school. My dad he was a shift worker, 4 days on, 4 days off at the airport. Every available overtime he would take. So sometimes he would work his 4 days off. He used to do a thing called the ghost shift, 24 hours at the airport, to put me into that. So there's a lot of people like that who've now been penalised, and their kids are now being brought out of a system that they wanted to make sacrifices for. I felt that was a misstep. That's the kind of decision that makes me think that Labour are a little bit ideological at times.
I get what you're saying, but just bringing it back to the facts here, there's going to be stories like this, and I do sympathise with that, by the way. But 94% of kids are in state schools. State schools are suffering. That's 1.7 billion, and it is only 0.5% of kids that will be removed. And we've also got to remember that private schools have increased their fees by 75% since the year 2000, often above inflation. So this has been happening for a long time as well. And there's efficiency around their businesses at the end of the day. So a lot of them are absorbing.
A lot of them are charities.
But a lot of them are absorbing that cost. Some aren't. So there's questions to be asked there. But I think it's the bigger picture for me that I look at here. And it's how do we make our state schools so good that people don't need to send their kids to private school, and you do that by more funding.
That's never going to happen. There will always.
I mean, that's the dream, right?
There will always be. Yeah, I mean, you would hope so, but there will always be a private system. It always amazes me when you see that we spend more on debt interest than we spend on education now, and I think that is a black mark on every government that has contributed to that.
And that's probably similar in most developed nations, I'd imagine. I don't know.
I can't, because we used to have governments that run a surplus. It seems to be something of the past, but and certainly can't blame Labour for this because we've had 14 years of Conservative government who didn't get this under control. But debt interest, to me, the debt interest that we have, or the debt we have as a country, I think is frightening. I think, anyway, look, we can go on forever about that. I do want to talk to you about immigration because I know this is really important for you. I think this has become an issue that's important for everyone now. Every party's talking about it. Conservatives absolutely did not deal with this. Let's just be honest. We had a massive increase in immigration over the last kind of 3 to 4 years. I was shown this chart by Matt Goodwin where it's like a hockey stick up.
Yeah.
Now, there has been an argument that it's for we allowed a lot of people in to boost GDP. I don't think that's a good reason to do. I think that's masking a problem. But there's a solid argument of declining birth rates that we need more people to come in. With a declining birth rate, how do we support an aging population? I'm sympathetic to that argument, but we do have all these kind of secondary issues where people are now talking about integration, or they're conflating one issue with another. It has led to overt racism. I say that as somebody who thinks we should get immigration under control. I just see it in the comments in my YouTube, just overt racism now. How do you deal with such a huge problem? And it's a big problem you have to deal with in Dover, right?
Absolutely. It's a big problem. It's one of my top priorities in general as a backbench MP. So start with illegal migration, which is predominantly the boat crossings. And, we had probably the chart you looked at, 400 crossed in 2018, 150,000 since. Now that is an exponential rise, right? That is ridiculous. That is under the Conservatives who are now telling us to secure the borders. We've inherited open borders.
But it's not just a UK issue.
It's not just a UK issue.
The mass migration now is a global issue.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons it shot up in 2018 is because we came out of the Dublin Agreement where we could return to France, for example. The moment we couldn't do that, there was more incentive for people to come over. So the smuggling gangs, who are very good at filling a niche in business, jumped on that, and now they're making $4 to $5 grand per crossing.
I know nothing of the Dublin Agreement.
Yeah.
What was it? And why did we pull out?
So essentially, it's a part of pre-Brexit, where if someone came over illegally, then they could be deported to their first port of call on their way to the United Kingdom. That's the gist of it.
What was the reason to pull out of the Dublin Agreement?
It was a Brexit. Okay. Unfortunately,
so it was something we had to come out of because of Brexit, and we didn't renegotiate something else.
No, under the Conservatives, and I hope that that's being looked at by the current Home Secretary, and I'm sure it is. The efforts that we've made so far have been sensible, but they'll take time to have an impact. So I'll run through, I won't go into too much here. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah.
But what we've done to begin with is we've set up a border security command. So it's its own individual unit. And do you remember I spoke about the National Crime Agency and how sometimes I got frustrated because one day I was looking at drugs, the next day I was looking at child exploitation, and it's about specialising. Now this unit will specialise. It will also bring in MI5, and that shows how seriously we're taking this. This is a national security issue, which is why they're involved now. And what that means is we can firstly form a reliable intelligence picture, because without knowing what you're fighting, it's really tough to fight it. We've also been speaking with international partners, so Dutch, French, Belgium, Germans, Italians, Iraq, to ensure that our law enforcement efforts are all joined up, because we need to work what we call upstream, where the migrants are travelling through. So we work out the routes, and then we work with all those countries essentially, so that they're stopping it from happening, and not just the French on the border.
Is it only in the Channel that happens, or do they come from?
Oh, they come from
all directions.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. The crossing into the UK is on the Channel, so it's callated over.
It's callated over.
Yeah. And they're intercepted whilst they're coming over.
So when we intercept a boat, do we take the boat back to France and put it back on the beach?
Because we don't have the Dublin Agreement in place.
Right.
Now, there's populist arguments, I think, because they're unrealistic, where people say
shoot the boat.
Right.
No, I'd say that as I say it facetiously, but I went over to Turkey when Erdogan was trying to kick out the migrants there, and people trying to cross into Greece. They started firing warning shots at the boat.
Yeah, I mean, this is
I don't agree with that. I think it's a bit much.
This is what I mean by British values of tolerance, and so the moment people enter the Channel and cross into our waters, it's our responsibility to ensure they don't die. Which is why we don't do the silly suggestions like turning a flimsy dinghy round on the biggest, most busiest shipping,
because people might drown.
Exactly. So we have a responsibility there, and of course we're going to ensure that they don't die. So our focus is on taking out the smuggling gangs, essentially treating them like terrorists. And by there's a announcement today at 12 o'clock, which I haven't seen yet, from Yvette Cooper, which I hope and I expect we'll be talking about some of the counter-terror powers that we bring in to deal with this. A lot of it's about disruption, by the way. One of the quite valid arguments is you're playing whack-a-mole with these criminals, because I've seen that happen with the National Crime Agency, right?
Well, it's the same with drugs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, having worked in counter-terror as well, I've seen the difference that the powers can make, because of course we want to get to the evidential threshold of charging to stick people in prison. But these people are good. So we often have enough intelligence that says, here's a smuggler or here's a terrorist, but not enough to kick the doors in, because you haven't managed to get it to that threshold. So
is some of it being run from here?
Oh, absolutely. There's a domestic angle.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we take the security services approach with terrorism, which is to stop something from happening, right? So their goal is to stop terrorists from attacking innocent people on our streets. We take that to the smuggling gangs. Let's stop them from doing what they're doing. Then you can bring in those disruptive tactics, techniques, use the legislation that, for example, Joe Bloggs isn't allowed to speak to certain people. They're not allowed to use phones. They're not allowed to use the internet. They're not allowed to travel. We can search them at ports, etc., etc. Also, extra powers to seize phones when people come over, so you can get that evidential or intelligence picture to feed in. So there's a hell of a lot that can be done, and we're getting there. We're starting to see an increase in National Crime Agency activity around the smuggling gangs. We've seen prosecutions in Germany. We've got the Iraqis working with us as well, but we're nowhere near there yet. And that's because we have inherited open borders, and we have to get the legislation in place to take them on.
Are you having to deal with these people when they hit the beach?
Not me personally.
But
so what we have, the border force will take them into an area and process them. They then go to Manston, which is just outside of my constituency, for a period of time, and then they're off to accommodation whilst their applications are processed, essentially. One of the tough bits for the staff is working out whether someone's an adult or a child, because a lot of them will come over, ditch all their documents, and say they're 16, for example, which is unacceptable. It's really difficult to work out the age of some of these people. I've seen some pictures where I was asked to give the age and I did get it wrong. And the science, you think about dental records and bone density, that will only give you a 4-year window, apparently, which means it's really tough. So we've got to make sure that the kids that come over are protected from possible predators who are pretending to be under 18. So it's a really, really
complex problem.
tough problem. We've got to secure the borders. We need to stop those crossings or bring them down significantly. I'm confident that our work bringing in sort of counter-terror powers will have an impact, but there is more we need to do on that as well.
At Ledden, we built the best Bitcoin-backed loan platform in the world. Proven, trusted, growing. Ledden's proven track record speaks for itself. Visit ledden.io/Mr. Obnoxious to get started. Ledden, there is no second best. Ledden is not regulated in the United Kingdom. Any credit products or virtual asset services provided by Ledden are not subject to UK regulatory protections. Please consider the risks associated with virtual assets and consult a financial advisor before making any decisions.
It feels to me like we should have a really good relationship with the French on this because it's France they're leaving. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure when people leave France, that's a positive for the French because it's no longer their problem. I know we spend a certain amount of money with them, but it feels like if we were stopping them at the beaches in Calais, that would be a far superior solution. And how it doesn't, you as a military man will know this, but it doesn't feel like it would take a huge amount of people to police those beaches.
I can't remember the mileage of the stretch. It is quite wide. The French are working hard on it.
But if you look at the cost to us, what is it, 8 billion a year? I don't know this, but I'd assume it costs a lot less than 8 billion a year to police those beaches.
Yeah, and this is where the French do need to see it as their problem too, because by securing that, they won't get the encampments in Calais, for example, and the high numbers of migrants travelling to that area. Now, I know there's a lot of work going on with the French, and my view on this is that we work with, we don't attack. What I saw from my predecessors and the last government was sort of Twitter diplomacy, which was attacking the French, right? That doesn't work.
No.
It's about working with each other to have them see it as their problem too, to help combat this.
Yeah. Okay, that's the problem with illegal migrants.
Yes.
This is on that point. I was listening yesterday to it was a speaker from the White House who said these are criminals. And she was quite blunt in saying these people are criminals. And there was uproar. I said, well, they've entered illegally. That's a crime. But it was quite blunt language. Certainly, people who are from more the reform right wing ends of the Conservative Party have started to use similar language. How does that you as a Labour person, because Labour's historically more empathetic to these issues, how do you feel about that kind of language? Should we treat them as criminals?
No, we should treat them as migrants. We should work out whether they are genuine refugees or not, and if they're not, they should be deported.
Okay,
that's it. And I'm hard on that. Simple as that. And if people don't have a right to be here, then they shouldn't be here, and we have to be firm on that. We've deported 16,400 in 6 months. That's a record high. That's 25% higher than last year.
How many will have come in 6 months?
Well, I mean, look, you're looking at, so in the last year there was around 30,000, so around 15,000 on small boats. So
about half. Is that 16,000 deported from that group?
No, this is the issue, right? So it's not all from that. So the way that things are working so far, we're 6 months in, is it's getting the Home Office working.
Yeah.
So those claims weren't being processed. It was taking years to process. So that's been sped up. So caseworkers in the Home Office are taking on significantly more and speeding it up. We've got more decision makers there too, which is really important. And we've bolstered the returns unit. That for me is vital, because if people are being deported at higher numbers who shouldn't be here, that starts to act as a deterrent, because what we inherited was essentially no system. So there was no deterrent there, and people could come over and sit waiting for years, and they often get sucked into sort of working in the black market, etc. So having the process work is really important. We've got to be really hard on that. Language does matter. Language is the most powerful tool we have, right? We can start wars with it. We can tell people we love with it. So be careful, but do the right thing. That's British values. So have a system that functions, that's rules-based, that has integrity, but we don't need to be divisive with it.
What about foreign criminals that are in our prison system? Why do we keep them in our prison system, not just deport them?
It's tough, isn't it? Because often where are we deporting them to? Because if it's a nation that's at war, for example, we might not be able to deport them. My view is the moment they've finished their sentence, they should be deported. But I think they should serve a sentence. And I know there's arguments around, funding, by the way, and we have to pay for that prison place. But that is a punishment. And if they go and leave the country, then have they been properly punished? And also there's the rehabilitation side, by the way, which means it might reduce the chance of them offending again when they go back to where they come from. I'm talking, serious crimes here, violent crimes.
Other parties have certainly pointed out that the European Convention on Human Rights is a block to properly managing our borders. Is that something that Labour also feel?
So our view, as it stands, is that the reason we have this mess is because of incompetence, not the ECHR. That's where I stand. And I don't think now's the time to be, leaving the ECHR, given some of the events around the world with human rights. I think British values is to lead from the front on human rights, but be firm. And that's why we have to deport those that aren't meant to be here.
Okay, legal migration. That's where the majority of people are coming in.
Yes, a million in the last year. So
yeah, isn't it? Didn't we have 3 years in a row where we were close to a million?
Very high.
Yeah, and that puts. We don't know. I've seen different arguments on the economic impact. Some people say net contributors, some people say they're not. Either way, at a time where disposable incomes have been hit, rents have gone up, mortgages gone up, petrol's gone up, groceries have gone up,
housing shortage,
issues in schools. It's an easy boogeyman for someone to pick and go, it's because of those. That's the problem. But do you see it as an issue, and does the Labour Party see it as an issue?
I see it as an issue, and the Labour Party sees it as an issue. We've said very clearly we're going to bring that down. The challenge we have here is we need to match the immigration market with the jobs market to make sure that we don't leave those vital gaps in the care sector, for example. Engineers are leaving this country, So we need to, in terms of growth in the economy, make sure that jobs are filled. But I want them to be filled with British workers. So let's ensure that education gets people into those jobs, that opportunities are there, that they're well paid, which, of course, with the minimum wage going up and the economy growing, and eventually that will happen. What we don't want to do is see the economy suffer with knee-jerk reactions, but we do need to bring it down.
There seems to be an imbalance between the amount of people who are out of work and then the need to bring people in to do certain jobs people in this country don't want to do. That to me has always felt a weird imbalance. It's like, why are we paying people not to work and then bringing people in to do the jobs they don't want to do? Is there a snobbery within our country? Certain people feel like they shouldn't be doing certain jobs?
I think, is it 2.3 million out of work on long-term sickness?
I think it was. So there was that Channel 4 documentary. I think it was more than that. That might even been young people. I feel like I saw a number of like 3.8 million.
Right. I mean, it's too high, whatever it is. And we must ensure that that's not happening. So that's where having the health service functioning as it should will certainly help. But also, things like mental health, making sure that people are getting the right support, because that's gone up significantly over the last decade, people suffering from mental health issues. I've had that, by the way, in the past, and I went through some cognitive behavioural therapy, which absolutely sorted me out. I just needed that sort of coping mechanisms. And if people don't have that available to them, they'll be out of work for longer. So it's really important that mental health support is there. At the same time, we've got to make sure that people aren't being lazy and that there's incentive to work and that they are actively job seeking. Now, it's the minority, I imagine, who act in that way.
Yeah, yes, possibly. But there are a large amount of people who aren't working. A large amount of people. It feels like it's quite easy now to claim mental health issues. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I've been there. Yeah. I've had anxiety. I've had panic attacks. I've had SVTs. Yeah. The best thing for me was getting out and exercising and going to work.
Yes, absolutely.
Like having purpose, having something to do.
Yeah.
But if we're in a world of incentives. If we incentivize people just to sit at home and not do anything, there's a certain percentage who will, and filling those jobs with people who from other countries, because I think perhaps people are just too lazy to get up and do some of those jobs. I think it's an issue.
I think there are people like that, and we've got to make it difficult for them to be like that. But I don't think it's the majority, because you've got to remember there are people with long-term disabilities, etc., who really do need that help. But it's hand-ups, not handouts, isn't it? As Tony Blair, I don't want to pretend I've made that phrase, but that's what it is, isn't it? It's I don't like the term welfare net, because you get trapped in a net. It needs to be sort of a trampoline or something. So we're there to catch people and then get them back into work as soon as they can with the support that they need, be it mental health support or making sure that they're aware of the jobs that are available, helping them get their CVs and interview skills, etc., etc. We do need people in work. Yeah.
Heathrow yesterday.
Yes.
Do you support it?
Yes.
Knee-jerk reaction?
No, I mean, this has gone on for a long time, hasn't it? And
I found out yesterday we haven't built a new runway in the UK since something like 1940.
And our road
blew my
infrastructure
mind.
is just so old, and there's not enough of it. We've got to ensure that we're growing as an economy, but it has to be balanced with the environmental issues, by the way. And, this is where sort of 2030 aims for electricity help and more sort of environmentally friendly biofuel, et cetera, is really important. But we do need to grow, and increasing that, or adding that runway, will help us grow.
Yeah, I mean, but I think Labour need growth now, or certainly to see something that's going to happen in at least the next 4 years, because you're going to face another election in 4 years. But really, there's a lot of pressure on Rachel Reeves now. We all know that.
Yeah.
That runway won't be built until 2035, 2040.
But the building process will, of course, create
jobs,
numerous jobs, many jobs.
Yeah.
I don't know how many, but it'll be a lot of jobs. And
once
that
it
helps.
Once it gets through
planning. That helps the economy. And this is where planning is really important. Like the NIMBYs need to take a backseat so that we can grow and move forward. And this is where the planning reform laws coming through will help.
Well, so what's coming in the planning reform laws? I'll give you an example. For example, our football club, right? We are an asset to that town. We are a growing football club. Rail Bedford back to promotions. We are top of the league again. If we win the league this year, we'll be the third club ever to do that. Our women's side won the treble last year. They're top of the league again. We raised the most money of a non-league football club ever, £3.6 million from billionaires Tyler Cameron Winklevoss from Winklevoss Capital.
Is that the real Facebook?
I think there's a solid argument that Zuckerberg stole. He did. He stole their idea. He absolutely stole their idea. But it's the most money ever raised, £3.6 million. We put it all into Bitcoin. That's now up to £6 million. For a tier 8 football club, that's a lot of money.
Yes.
We are bringing people into the town, naturally bringing people into the town. People are traveling all over the world to see us. Every match I go to, there's someone from America or Australia. Some have come just for a game. Some have come because they're on holiday here. We are clearly and obviously a net good for the town.
Yes. I
have struggled to get the council behind us. I mean, we have this solid plan to get a team in the Football League. Bedford have never had a team in the Football League. We're the second largest town behind Wakefield to not have a team in the Football League. We have the finances, the resource, and the backing, everything to do this. I think that's an obvious good thing for the town.
Yeah.
If we have a team in the Football League, that will create jobs, that will create secondary businesses that operate around the team. I cannot, for the life of me, get solid support from the council. If they hear this, they might support me less now because I'm saying this. The mayor has not helped at all. And then when we get into planning, if we want to put out something like, for next season, you have these things called ground gradings. Every promotion, you have to increase the capacity of the ground. We've got to put in turnstiles. We go to planning. We don't know if we're going to get planning. When planning comes in, we have all these it's almost like little jobs they want us to do. One, either for the council or two, one example would be we now need to put bike racks in. It's part of the planning. You have to put bike racks. Yeah, I see you raise your eyes because nobody bikes. I've seen one person ever bike to us. Yeah. That was a player. But nobody bikes. It's quite a dangerous route to bike. Yet that puts on cost, pressure, timing. And it feels like, I don't know. I don't know how planning operates or where the planning rules come from, but it just feels like this bloated bureaucratic nightmare that for me is directly stopping growth.
Yeah. But let's see what comes in the legislation.
Yeah.
It's about streamlining and making it easier to get planning approved, essentially. And I hope that means that sort of jobs worth approach will be dropped so people like yourself can grow and thrive. And like you said, it's good for the community. Rachel mentioned Old Trafford yesterday and looking to drive that forward. Now, I think the reason she did that is it's an example of the sort of planning processes that will be streamlined and made easier so that we can all benefit.
Yeah, there was an example, I was listening to the interview this morning where they talked about they imagine it will take 7 to 8 years to get planning for this runway.
Yeah.
If this was in Dubai, it would take months.
Yeah.
And so how much of the planning stuff, I know nothing about the inner workings of planning. How much autonomy does a local council have, and how, you might even know this, how much comes from central government?
I've only put in for a planning permission once, but I do deal with bits and bobs. But it is more of a council bag. There will be opportunities for government to override what councils say, which means if there's deliberate blockers on infrastructure projects that will help us achieve growth, the government can say, do it.
All right.
Within reason.
Law and order.
Yes.
I feel, I think you might agree with me, especially with your dad being a cop, but I don't feel like I see the police anymore.
Yeah.
And so in our town centre, we have a problem of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have alcoholics, crackheads. Mm-hmm. They make the lives of people in the town centre a misery. They make the lives of the people trying to operate businesses a misery. I know there's now a radio system where if they see a shoplifter, they report it, but it's just a continual problem. But I don't see any police in the town centre, hardly ever. I used to. I felt like as a kid, I used to always see police.
Yeah.
I just feel like I don't see police anymore. And I don't know how much of this is police are tied up in red tape or there's just a lack of funding for actual active police on the street. But I feel like I wish we could go back to a time where we just saw more police on the street.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a bit of both.
Right.
So 21,000 police were cut under the last government. We're bringing them back. Community police officers. So each community or ward will be allocated its own police officer where they'll be easy to contact. That's important. It's going to take time, obviously, with recruitment, etc. But also we've got to retain within the police force. When my dad joined, he was joining as a career, but that's not happening as much anymore. People are doing 5, 6, 7 years, then leaving to go and do other things. Now,
is that because there's better opportunities in the private sector with the experience?
I imagine so.
Yeah.
Also, salaries. There was a long period with no growth in their salaries. That's changed now. Also, the fact that they're undermanned and there's that bureaucratic nonsense that they have to go through means they're often off the streets. That's not what a copper joins to do. They're out to fight crime and catch criminals and support the public. But if they're sat behind the scenes, having to fill in 20 forms or whatever it might be, then that's going to have an impact on their morale. So streamlining that's really important, but also ensuring that we're recruiting people in, paying them right, so that they're out on the streets essentially.
There's a lot to do.
A lot to do. It's such a challenge, isn't it? It's we have inherited a really difficult situation.
Every government says that.
They do say it, but we have, and the fact is we've had those 21,000 cuts to the police. The NHS is on its knees. I couldn't get a GP appointment when I wanted one. That was very common on the doors. The mortgages had gone up, borders were open, the energy prices are through the roof. It's a really difficult situation, but we're working hard to get there. It does take time. We're only 6 months in, but we talk about that decade of national renewal, and the reason we say that is because you pull one lever, it has an impact somewhere else, and you've got to make sure the balance is right and that there's opportunities for that growth and opportunity.
Yeah, because there's a demand for instant results.
Yes, there is.
People want instant results for you. Do you feel that pressure?
Absolutely. Yes. it's really tough sometimes because you've got to explain, look, I know we've said that we're going to do that. There's a process in Parliament to go through. You've got to have the first reading, the committee stage, the second reading. It's got to go to the Lords. They might make an amendment. It will come back to us to debate again. Then it goes back, etc., etc. So it takes time to pass legislation to make difference. Once it's passed, it then takes time to have an impact.
In some ways, I feel a little bit sorry for Rachel Reeves. I mean, I disagree with most of her policies, and I doubt she'd ever sit here, but if she did, I'd have some tough questions for her. But I feel like she, in some ways, all the eyes are on her at the moment. They're not as much. It feels like more so than Keir Starmer.
She's a solid operator. She is that iron chancellor, I think, which is what we need. I think a lesser woman would perhaps fold under the pressure, but she's been absolutely fantastic.
Last question.
Yeah,
this has been brilliant. Thanks for your time.
No, not so.
Who do you think is going to be the bigger opposition, bigger threat to you in the next election? Conservatives or Reform?
It depends. So if the Conservatives stick with their leaderless leader at the moment, with Kemi, she's not doing a good job of uniting them.
Is she a gift to Labour?
Absolutely. Stay where you are. If they continue down this route, then Reform have an opportunity there. If the Conservatives fix themselves, then lesser so, I imagine. But it's really difficult to say. 4 years is a really long time in politics. So, by the way, I've got a lot of respect across the board for all parties.
Yeah.
Having fought for democracy, people ask me, what do you think of Reform? Well, I respect that what they've managed to achieve so far. I don't agree with their politics, and I don't think they're right for the country, and I don't think they stand up for British values as much as they claim they do. But I do respect the democratic process and the fact that they're benefiting from that.
I'm going to ask you a similar question to ask Ted Cruz. What do you think Conservatives do better than Labour?
Historically, they've displayed themselves as the party of law and order and defence, and they've always done a really good job of displaying themselves like that. But the fact is, they're not. I don't think there's anything they do better than Labour now, other than previously displaying themselves in a certain way. And I genuinely mean that. If there's,
they're a party in decline.
Absolutely. If there's something I thought they did better, I would say it, and I genuinely don't think there is.
Do you think Reform are doing anything better than the Labour Party?
They're saying things that cut through, but they wouldn't be able to deliver them. And this is the thing, when you're in opposition as a small party, you can say what you want. When you're in government, you've got to deliver. So it has to be realistic and achievable.
Yeah. Well, look, I really appreciate you doing this.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I enjoyed meeting you before. I've enjoyed watching your interviews. It's great to, rather than just have a slanging match and try and trap somebody, just let somebody speak and hear what you've got to say. And one of the things I listened to this morning, you were called a rising star of the Labour Party. So I'd like to see where you go. See if you end up at the front bench. But look, I appreciate you, Mike. Thanks for coming in, and good luck in.
I'll have to come over and watch a Bedford game at some point.
Come and watch a team that wins trophies.
Yeah, sounds good. Have a pint as well.
Have a pint. Yeah, we'll have you in Bedford anytime.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening, everybody. See you later.